How to take first step for talking. Elara watched others converse effortlessly in English, a silent envy gnawing at her. Her heart ached to join in, to articulate her thoughts without hesitation. Yet, a formidable wall of fear always blocked her way. How to take first step for talking, she often wondered, feeling paralyzed by self-doubt and anxious anticipation. She observed how people speak English, with such natural rhythm and flow, a melody she desperately wished to master. Their words seemed to dance in the air, while hers remained trapped, unspoken. This stark contrast fueled her frustration, deepening her reluctance to even attempt a single phrase. The relentless fear of imperfection was her constant companion. Every imagined sentence ended in a colossal blunder. "I don't want to make mistakes, but I always why," became a silent mantra, echoing in the quiet chambers of her mind, a source of profound self-criticism. Her initial attempts at memorization felt like an uphill battle. Flashcards piled up, vocabulary lists blurred into an indistinguishable mess. How to remember words seemed like an unsolvable riddle, adding another layer to her growing despair about her English journey. Sometimes, the frustration grew so intense, she'd whisper, "Why you should not learn English." It felt like an insurmountable mountain, an endless climb with no visible summit. The effort seemed disproportionate to the perceived lack of progress, making her question the entire endeavor. The thought of English talking practice sent shivers down her spine. The imagined scenario of stumbling over words, of mispronouncing syllables, of failing to convey meaning, was simply unbearable. She preferred silence to the potential humiliation, retreating into her shell. Elara spent countless hours listening to English, consuming podcasts, movies, and music. Her comprehension steadily improved, a small victory in a landscape of struggle. Yet, the gap between understanding and speaking remained vast, a chasm she felt ill-equipped to bridge. One afternoon, browsing an online forum, she stumbled upon a very interesting story. It was about a famous polyglot who confessed to making thousands of mistakes on their journey to fluency, embracing each one as a stepping stone. This revelation struck Elara like a bolt of lightning. The polyglot's narrative shifted her perspective entirely. They had explicitly stated, "Why I always make mistakes is because I am learning." This simple rephrasing resonated deeply within her soul. The story continued, emphasizing that mistakes were not failures but vital feedback mechanisms. They were indicators of effort, proof of engagement. The author asserted, "You must make mistakes to truly learn," a counterintuitive yet profound truth. The polyglot also stressed the paramount importance of why you must listen. They explained that listening primes the brain, creating an intuitive understanding of language patterns before active production. It builds a crucial foundation. Inspired, Elara decided to redefine her approach. Her first goal was not flawless speech, but simply to take the first step for talking. This meant lowering her expectations and focusing purely on participation, however small. She began by mimicking short phrases she heard in her listening practice. Not to speak to anyone yet, but just to feel the words in her mouth, to practice the sounds internally. This was her cautious initial foray. Her self-talk shifted from condemnation to curiosity. Instead of, "Why I always make mistakes," it became, "What did I learn from that mistake?" This subtle change empowered her, turning errors into valuable lessons. She started to understand how people speak English not as a magical gift, but as a result of consistent exposure and practice. It wasn't about perfection, but about communication, about conveying meaning, even imperfectly. For how to remember words, she adopted a more active approach. Instead of rote memorization, she started using new words immediately in short, simple sentences, even if only in her head or whispered aloud. The pressure to be perfect gradually dissipated. The polyglot story had truly freed her. "I don't want to make mistakes, but I always why," no longer held the same fearful weight. It was just a natural part of the journey. She found a language exchange partner online, a patient individual willing to engage in English talking practice. Her heart still pounded before each session, but the desire to connect now outweighed her apprehension. Her partner encouraged her, emphasizing that communication was key, not grammatical precision. "Just speak," they advised, "your fluency will follow." This simple encouragement was incredibly empowering for Elara. Every conversation, however faltering, became a small triumph. She made countless errors, of course, but each one felt less like a failure and more like a necessary correction, guiding her forward. "Why you must listen" became a guiding principle. She devoted even more time to active listening, not just for comprehension, but for intonation, rhythm, and natural phrasing. It enriched her internal language model. Slowly but surely, the words began to flow more freely. The mental block that had paralyzed her started to crumble. She realized that the biggest barrier had been her own perception of mistakes. The question, "Why I always make mistakes," transformed into an affirmation, "Because I am bravely putting myself out there." This shift in mindset was pivotal, a complete reevaluation of her learning process. She reflected on her past doubts, particularly, why you should not learn English. She now understood that giving up would have meant missing out on a world of connection and personal growth. The journey was still challenging, but it was no longer daunting. Each English talking practice session brought new insights, new words, and a deeper understanding of the nuances of the language. How to remember words became almost effortless as she integrated new vocabulary into real conversations. The context made them stick far more effectively than isolated lists ever could. She even started finding joy in her errors, sometimes laughing at a particularly funny mix-up. This newfound lightheartedness made the learning process infinitely more enjoyable and sustainable for her. Her confidence blossomed. The initial fear of how to take first step for talking had been replaced by a genuine eagerness to communicate, to share her thoughts and feelings in English. She discovered that, how people speak English was not about being perfect, but about being intelligible and authentic. It was about connection, not about flawless grammar or accent. The very interesting story of the polyglot continued to serve as her guiding light, a constant reminder that the path to mastery is paved with consistent effort and a positive attitude towards errors. Elara found a local English conversation group, pushing herself further out of her comfort zone. The environment was supportive, and everyone understood the shared struggle of language acquisition. The concept of why you must listen became clearer than ever. By actively listening to native speakers and fellow learners, she absorbed patterns and phrases she wouldn't have learned from textbooks alone. She realized that her early question, "I don't want to make mistakes but I always why," was a universal one. Every learner, regardless of proficiency, makes mistakes. It's a fundamental part of the journey. The joy of expressing herself, even imperfectly, became her greatest motivator. The sense of achievement after a successful, albeit flawed, conversation was incredibly rewarding and inspiring for Elara. She started writing short journal entries in English, further integrating how to remember words and solidifying her understanding of sentence structure and common idioms. The fear of English talking practice had completely vanished. It was now an anticipated activity, an opportunity to test new vocabulary and solidify grammatical concepts in a real-world setting. Her journey proved that the initial thought of why you should not learn English was a fallacy born of fear. English opened doors to new cultures, new ideas, and new friendships, enriching her life immensely. She encouraged others facing similar struggles, sharing her own, very interesting story, of overcoming fear. She emphasized that fluency is a marathon, not a sprint, and persistence is key. The importance of why you must listen resonated deeply as she observed how quickly her pronunciation and intonation improved just by imitating what she heard, internalizing the natural flow of English. She no longer asked, "Why I always make mistakes," with despair, but with a strategic mindset, analyzing what went wrong and how to improve. Mistakes were now data points, not failures. How to take first step for talking became a mantra for beginners she met. She advised them to start small, even with simple greetings or asking for directions, building confidence incrementally over time. She understood how people speak English by embracing their imperfections. No one is perfectly flawless, and native speakers make mistakes too. The goal is clear communication and mutual understanding. To reinforce how to remember words, she used spaced repetition apps and actively sought out new words in her reading and listening materials, creating personal connections to them. English talking practice evolved from dreaded obligation to enjoyable exploration. She sought out diverse speaking partners and topics, expanding her horizons with every new interaction. The transformation was profound. Elara, once paralyzed by fear, now spoke with genuine confidence, still making mistakes, but never letting them derail her communication or enthusiasm. She realized that the question, "I don't want to make mistakes but I always why," was actually the very reason she was learning and improving. Mistakes were the engine of her progress, a vital part of the process. Her own very interesting story became an inspiration. She shared it often, particularly the part about embracing imperfection and the liberation that came from letting go of the need for flawless speech. The initial doubt, why you should not learn English, now seemed absurd. English had opened up so many opportunities, both personally and professionally, making her world infinitely larger and more colorful. She continued to prioritize why you must listen, knowing that consistent input was the fuel for her ongoing language development, constantly refining her ear and internalizing new structures. Why I always make mistakes had been replaced by a joyful acceptance of the learning curve, an understanding that every stumble was a step forward, a sign of growth and courage. Her journey beautifully illustrated how to take first step for talking. It wasn't about perfection, but about the willingness to try, to be vulnerable, and to learn from every single attempt. She now truly appreciated how people speak English not as a flawless performance, but as a dynamic, evolving process. Communication was the art, and mistakes were merely brushstrokes. Her strategies for how to remember words had become highly personalized and effective, no longer a chore but an organic part of her daily interactions and media consumption. The continuous English talking practice built her resilience and adaptability, allowing her to navigate complex conversations with increasing ease and genuine enjoyment. She was living proof that the fear of, "I don't want to make mistakes but I always why," could be transformed into a powerful catalyst for growth, leading to true fluency and self-confidence. Ilara's story, now a testament to perseverance, was itself a very interesting story, inspiring many others to embark on their own English learning adventures, free from crippling fear. She understood with unwavering certainty, why you must listen, was the foundation, the silent builder of linguistic intuition that made speaking feel more natural and less forced over time. The question, why I always make mistakes, no longer lingered with self-reproach, but with an empowered curiosity, analyzing them for future improvement, embracing them as signs of progress. Her English journey, once a source of anxiety, became a profound source of joy and accomplishment. She had not only learned a language, but she had also learned a valuable lesson about self-acceptance and resilience. So, take that first step, listen intently, embrace every mistake, and you too will unlock the incredible power of speaking English, transforming your learning into a truly amazing adventure.